Take this opportunity to welcome everyone here today after that wonderful music to get us started here. And I'm so sorry, as I should get used to this. And I want to welcome everyone today on our first Humanity in Healthcare virtual conversation of the academic year, after our first in-person half-day Humanity in Healthcare in October. And I want to start the day by acknowledging those of us attending from the Kingston area are situated on the traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territories. And on this first day of snow, I want to give thanks for these lands and the signs of transitions to a new season, and also give thanks for the time we have given ourselves over the next hour to be present in the moment on these lands as we collectively reflect on the inequities that are so pervasive in our healthcare system, and the opportunity to challenge ourselves in how we think about inequities, considering our privilege and unearned advantages, and what we bring to our everyday interactions as health providers and people simply interacting with people. My name's Catherine Donnelly, and I'm one of the members of the Planning Committee, along with Damon Dagnoni, Hugh Wiley, Ernest Snellgrove Clark, and of course with the support of the Queen's Op-Deds, and of course Jennifer Copland, who holds us all together. I'm so fortunate to welcome Stephanie Nixon, our speaker today. I had the honor of first hearing Stephanie present her work back in 2018 in the inaugural Malcolm Peete Lecture. And it's shaped how the way I understand inequity and my role. If you haven't had the opportunity to read Stephanie's work, I'll make sure that I put a few different links in the chat. Stephanie is the new Vice Dean at the School of Rehabilitation Therapy at Queen's and a new Kingstonian, so happy to have her here in Kingston. Stephanie is presented across the globe on the COIN model of privilege and critical allyship, and I know she'll be leading us today together in a powerful conversation about privilege. Stephanie, thank you, and I turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that warm welcome. Greetings, everyone. Choosing to spend some time here at the end of what I'm sure was a very long day for many of you. I think some of the clinicians in the crowd, perhaps a very long night as well. I'm so grateful that you're here, and I promise to honor your time by making this the most beautiful sort of last 50 minutes that we've got together, right up to the top of the clock again. I'd like to begin with a story, and it's to invite each of us to take your mind's eye back to January 2022. Jan 2022, and if you can remember, what were you doing then? What was happening in your world? What was happening in my world is that I was leading a really stable life and household in Toronto, but had been invited to consider coming here to Queen's. And I was in that final stage of as a household, of making the decision. And I had something magical happen that month, and it was that I tuned into my first Humanities in Healthcare event. And it was with Deji Ayarande. And it was so beautiful. And the crowd that was there that day, the nature of what was being discussed, I must say it was one of the signals. Yes, Tanya, you too. It was one of the signals that told me this is going to be a good place for me. And now here I am, not that much later, being the one that's on screen. So the invitation is really meaningful to me. Thank you so much to this team for inviting me in. So let's get grounded. I want you to feel yourself where you are. Feel the ground beneath you, literally the ground beneath you. Take a deep breath. And another. We are here. We came into the space today listening to Maliseet artist Jeremy Dutcher, an Indigenous composer and musicologist. And in addition to his music being so beautiful, I was interested in opening our session today with Jeremy Dutcher's work for a very specific reason. And I'm not sure if you caught it, but there's something magic that happened in that song we were playing called Okitan. In fact, the whole album, you can find it online. And Jeremy is a musicologist and a singer and a composer, and also has looked historically at the music of his own nation, and was able to find some wax recordings of not just members of his nation, but his actual ancestors creating music from over 100 years ago. And what he's done in Okitan and the rest of this album is sampled the voices of his ancestors and brought it into present day, composed music around it, and created something never before imagined, created something even more beautiful to help us move into the future. And the nature of what we're talking about today, privilege, and its links with health, humanity, and what this means for all of us in healthcare, I feel like we have some lessons to take from that metaphor. That if I do my work here right today, if we do our work here right, we will leave with this sense that what our work is to do is to take the lessons from history, including how each of us is structured in history, not by what we've asked for, not by anything we've done, not by merit or worth or behavior, but just because of the bodies we happen to find ourselves in, where we happen to find ourselves structured in history. And we will lift the lessons, bring them into the contemporary moment. and make sense of them, bring them together in order to imagine a more beautiful future together. That's the nature of this work on privilege and how it links to humanity. We okay so far? So now I'm going to ask you a question, and I want to give you a heads up that I'm going to invite you in a moment, if you're up for it, to turn on your videos for a minute. And it may be that many of you would prefer not to for lots of good reasons, so don't feel pressured to, but I'm going to invite you to turn on your video in a moment because I'm going to invite you to vote. I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to ask you to vote, and I'm going to ask you to vote with your thumb like this. So here's how it's going to go. And for those of you who don't want to come onto camera, that's just fine. So the nature of this work in privilege and allyship, this coin model that I'll be introducing today, it is really explicitly a translation tool. So it's not new. None of the ideas that I'll be sharing today are new, and none of them are mine either. Like, let's get that out right at the beginning. These are not new. They're not mine. These are old ideas. These are ideas that I consider in the field of anti-oppression, which until a few years ago, many folks in healthcare hadn't even heard of. There's perhaps some on the line today who are hearing that term for the first time. And if so, that's great. So this is anti-oppression work. This is an anti-oppression workshop, and I'll be using the coin model as a translation tool for core concepts in anti-oppression. And the thing about anti-oppression is that it's a practice. It's forever work, and it's journey work. It's work that we will be in all our days, right? And so I wanted to invite you to reflect on where you might see yourself in the journey right now. And so here's your options. It may be that for some of you, you're brand new to this, right? You're like, I've been hearing about privilege and oppression and allyship, and I have such an appetite for it, but it's really new to me. And I'm really curious, and I maybe have heard of anti-oppression, maybe not, right? So brand new. And if that's you, your thumb is going to be right down at 6 o'clock. Don't vote yet, by the way. We're going to get set up and then we're all going to vote at the same time. So if that's you, your thumb's going to be right down at 6 o'clock. I'm also certain that there are folks in the room today who know more about this than me, who've been in it longer than me. I don't want to give the illusion that I've been doing this my whole career. I'm a late bloomer. I've come to this in the last decade, post tenure. Like, this is a late wake up call in my world. And now I find myself in an interesting space of trying to make my own journey more visible, as flawed and fraught as it is, right? So so I'm sure there's folks in the room who've been doing anti-oppression work longer than me. And if you've been in this for a long time, then your thumb's way up at 12 o'clock. And heads up that if you vote like that, it does not mean that I'm going to conscript you to help run this workshop. It just tells us that there's lots of experience in the room today. And then there's many of us who are probably somewhere in the middle, right? We're like, I'm not brand new, but I don't even consider myself 9 o'clock. Like, I'm like down here in the gas tank. Or you're like, I've been in it for quite a long time, but I know people that have been in it longer. So I'm going to just be up somewhere around here. So the question is, where do you see yourself right now in your own journey of anti-oppression work, being in this work of understanding what's my work to do, how am I showing up to be involved in the justice work that's grounded in anti-oppression? 1, 2, 3, vote. And hold it up just for a minute. I love the folks doing it online, only of this or this, right? There's no gray zone. I'm just flipping through, seeing you all. Thank you so much. Okay, you can put your fingers, thumbs down. What this tells us is that we have exactly the right crowd in the room. This is exactly the right group for this conversation. Sometimes in this work, there's a feeling that if I'm down here, then I'm too late, that I should be feeling badly about myself, or showing up with some kind of feels that may get in the way of us actually leaning into and just being present in the work. And so I want to say, for anyone who was down here, we need you here. How fantastic that you're here. The fact that you're here is actually going to make this workshop better. And this workshop is designed for you, by the way, the folks who are down here. And then there's the folks who are more up here. And this workshop is also designed for you. And this workshop's going to be better because you're here, right? Because this is about collaborative learning, where all of our learning is better because of the unique range of expertise and experiences that each of us is bringing today. So wherever you're at in the journey today, today's the right place. And with that, I think I'm going to dive in here. Okay. So step one. Let me get set up here. Almost ready. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up that you're seeing the right screen? It's a title slide. Yeah, great. All right. So welcome to this exploration of privilege and what it might have to do with humanity and healthcare. Honoring the great Deji, who kind of paved the way for me to come be with you today. And as I was mentioning earlier, none of the ideas I'm going to be sharing today are new and none of them are mine. And it's important to note that they come from a very specific set of skills, and it's actually Black and Indigenous thinkers, struggle leaders who for decades and centuries have been trying to share these exact ideas with people like me. And so that's where these ideas come from. And any understanding that I have of these ideas is because of the generosity and care of the many present day carriers of these wisdoms, Black and Indigenous folks, including these many friends and colleagues that I note here. And I especially want to honor my colleague, Lana James, with whom I work very closely, who holds me to account, who deploys me, right, to do this work, this whiteness work. Because hopefully more than a few people have thought, like, wait a second, a white woman at the front of the room giving an anti-oppression workshop, that doesn't feel quite right. And if you had that spidey sense, then that is exactly the one to have, right? That is exactly the way to be feeling about this work. It is a very dangerous pattern for folks like me to be centered in this anti-oppression work. And yet here I am. So why is that? Why is it that I am deployed to do this work in solidarity with my many struggle partners, but I've been invited to step up in this particular role? We'll attend to that as we go. So I know sometimes in these gatherings, it's a bit more of a dialogue, a bit more of a Q&A. I've set us up as a workshop today, and I've set up the workshop around a single question. And it's for each of us to ask, what's my work to do in the path to justice? What's my work to do in EDI? What's my work to do in reconciliation? What's my work to do in fill in the blank that has anything to do with power? Which to my mind is everything, right? There is no quality education, no quality healthcare without attention to power. And so I'm inviting this core question, we're circling around it for our next while together here, of what is my work to do? And I'm going to offer you a framework for thinking about that. And it's using this metaphor of a coin. And look at that, poof, it showed up right in the chat box, a link to this open access article. There's a number of resources related to the coin model that are sitting on my faculty page as well, including a French version of this article and an audio version of this article, a short primer, a Q&A kind of doc, a few more videos. So you're welcome to access those however you find helpful. And while we're going through this work, I want you to take on the meta project, if you will, of not only being in this workshop with me, but watching yourself be in this workshop with me. And I want to set up a framework of 3 questions for you to be asking yourself at that meta level. And I'd like you to actually write these down. And it could be on a new screen or actually a pen and paper, but I want you to actually collect these 3 questions. And the first is, what insights are landing for me? What insights are landing for me? This is not the kind of work where all the learning happens at the end, right? This is the kind of work, because let's get super clear on this. It's not that there's the same set of facts that I'm hoping we all understand by the time 6 o'clock arrives. It's not that kind of session at all. It's different. It's that each of us is being invited to consider, what are the messages that are mine to take today? What are the messages that are mine to take today? And it's going to be different for each of us. And so this first question is the invitation for you to collect that as we go. The second question is, how do I feel? What's happening? What are the feelings I'm having as I'm doing this learning and unlearning? Because here's what I've been taught over and over again about anti-oppression work, is that we cannot think our way out of oppression. One more time, we cannot think our way out of oppression. That we need an intellectual analysis, and I'll be offering one up as we go. But it's more than intellectual, it's embodied, it's spiritual. There is no arriving at this more beautiful future without being able to engage in it in an embodied way. These systems of inequality we'll be discussing, they play out through our bodies. And so the second question is an invitation to tune into, how do I feel physically, right? You may notice yourself at times being like, oh, my pulse is racing a bit, or like, oh, my scalp is prickling, or like, oh, I've got a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. And also, how do you feel emotionally? What's actually showing up for you? You know, are you feeling a bit of, is some of the shame or guilt showing up? At other times, is it a bit of anger or frustration? It would not be unusual at this point in a session like this for folks to maybe have a bit of a feeling of impatience with maybe the thought of, when is this workshop going to start? Yeah. And so let me pause and say, the pedagogical approach to this work that I'm taking, to make it explicit, is what I might frame as scaffolded teachings. Scaffolded teachings that are set up so that you can take from them what feels right. And this is why the workshop started when we opened the waiting room. Yeah, and see if you can go back to that moment in your body when you arrived into this space and that music was playing. And then the beautiful opening from Catherine, grounding us, noting the first snowfall. And then the way I've opened us with a story, a personal story, the metaphor from Jeremy Dutcher's work, setting up whose ideas these are and whose they aren't, dropping in some comments about questioning the centering of whiteness in this work, right? It's for you to pick up what you need to pick up as we go. And given that anti-oppression is a practice, it's not a set of facts, it is a practice. Let me make explicit what's happening right here, right now. These three questions that you're being invited to collect and consider in this workshop, this is meta, because these are the kinds of questions we want to be attending to in the practice of anti-oppression as well. So what insights are landing for me? How do I feel? And finally, what are my next steps for learning in action? What am I actually going to do? There's a slippage that's been happening where work like this, capacity building work, learning, unlearning work, gets sometimes framed as if it is the work, as if it is the change making. And so this is our opportunity to interrupt that slippage. This is not the work. The work is material change in the real world, the material redistribution of power and resources, the material difference as judged by folks historically pushed to the margins. That's the work. This is our work on en route. So this is the invitation in the third one, to not think my work will start when I know enough, but rather what's getting made possible for action right now, responsible, accountable action right inside this space. And so I'm just going to take a quiet moment for you to look at these three questions. Ask yourself, which one am I drawn to now? And jot yourself a bullet point about it. A quiet moment. Which one are you drawn to? And what note, what gift do you want to give yourself? Because you're not going to remember this moment later. What's the gift you want to give yourself now in one bullet? Go ahead. When you're ready, I invite you to bring your attention back to the screen. It may be that some of you don't have as easy a time seeing the screen, so I'll be describing our images as we go. On the screen right now is a coin, is a picture of a coin, a yellow coin. And I'd like to use this to introduce you to the metaphor that's deployed in this coin model. And the metaphor is fairly straightforward. It only has three parts. There's the coin itself, there's the top of the coin, and there's the bottom of the coin. So there's the coin itself and the top and the bottom, and that's all there is to it. And the coin itself represents, in this metaphor, a system of inequality, a system of oppression, the big isms, racism, ableism, settler colonialism, cisgenderism, on and on it goes. These are big historic social structures that were designed very intentionally to give advantage to some and disadvantage to others. They are societal. There's no opting out of these coins. We are part and parcel of these coins. They were all around before we got here, right? Before we were born. They have shaped society and all the institutions in it, and even ourselves. So these are the big systems of inequality, and given where we are doing this work today in the nation state of Canada, we know that Canada was founded on the coin of settler colonialism and its tight relationship with the coin of structural racism. So these big systems of inequality that have historically structured society and continue to structure our institutions day in, day out. And we find ourselves, not by merit or behavior or worth, we find ourselves on the top or bottom of each of these coins, depending on how we happen to be structured in history. So for me, for instance, I'm white. I didn't ask to be white. I am white. And so I find myself on the top of the coin of racism. And it means that I get a benefit that others don't. I didn't earn it. I just get it because of who I happen to be. And I may not even know that I'm getting it, but that doesn't mean I'm not getting it. It just means that I'm not aware. And the bottom of the coin is the exact opposite. I'm a woman. I didn't ask to be a woman, I just am. And so I find myself structured in history to be on the bottom of the coin of sexism. And it means that I get a disadvantage that others don't, and I didn't earn it. And for the coins where we're on the bottom, we usually know pretty well when we're receiving that disadvantage. So it's the top where it's very difficult to actually understand our social location. The coins where we're on the bottom are usually very clear to us. And in this framework, what do I call the top of the coin? Do it in your own mind. What do you think the top of the coin is called? This idea of unearned advantage. This is privilege. So in this framework, this is privilege. It's a position of unearned advantage that one receives because of how one is structured in history. And I call the bottom of the coin in this framework oppression. And we might hear the language of privilege and oppression used differently in other settings, and it's probably right. My experience has been in anti-oppression work, in justice work, that one of the real shortcomings is that we don't have a common language or a common mental map for engaging with each other on this really delicate and thorny work. And so what's being offered up here is a mental map and a shared language for coming together around difficult issues. And I want to take it one step further, given the focus of today's work, and talk about how these coins didn't come out of nowhere. They were created very intentionally by people on the top of the coin to deploy power over folks on the bottom. This is about domination and subordination. And one of the key tactics by which this subordination is deployed is dehumanization. Is by framing folks on the bottom, folks on the top of the coin, not as in a position of unearned advantage, but as just normal. And folks on the bottom as not in a position of unearned disadvantage, but as different, wrong, broken, in need of fixing, less than human, right? And we don't want to be doing any of this. This is why we need a coherent power analysis. Now, it's important to recognize that there's not just one coin for all privilege and all oppression. There are many, many different coins, and on the list goes. And it's not that some of us in the room are the ones that are privileged and some of us in the room are the ones that are oppressed. It's that we all find ourselves on the top of some coins and the bottom of others at the exact same time. Yeah. That said, I'm not suggesting that we all face equal amounts of oppression. You know, I find myself on the bottom of the coin of sexism, but I'm on the top of most of the other coins. And that intersectional arrangement, complex arrangement of advantage and disadvantage, it works very differently for me than it would for a woman who doesn't enjoy other locations on the top of other coins, right? And this matters, all of this matters for us in health and healthcare, because where one finds oneself on the top or the bottom influences who's healthy and who's ill and the kind of care we get. Where one finds oneself influences and sometimes determines who lives and who dies. So this is how we bring a power analysis, or one of the ways of bringing a power analysis to health inequities. And much of my own training as a clinician, as a physiotherapist, PhD in public health, and then in global health, I found that the language around health inequities was often framed as if they are natural, right? There was no power analysis. It's bad, and it's a shame that it happens, but it just is the way it is, as opposed to understanding that most health inequity is human-made and can be human-unmade, and that it's our work to unmake it, and hence the avoidable in there. These are avoidable health inequities. So how do we do that? And we know that these systems of inequality, they don't just influence health, they influence all of the institutions in society. So we know that they're also playing out right here in higher education, right inside the universities. We know that they're playing out in professional advancement, right? And on the list goes. So they shape all facets of society. Okay. So a check-in. Do this in your own head. The metaphor is relatively straightforward, but it is so easy to lose track of. So I just want you to do it in your own head for a minute. What does the coin itself represent? It's a big historic system of inequality. And what does the top and bottom of the coin, what do they represent? It's unearned advantage, unearned disadvantage, not because of anything someone did, but because of where you find yourself structured in history. All right, we're about to scaffold on. Here we go. I'm going to put you to work now, collectively. This is where we're going to do some of our collective, collaborative teaching and learning. I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to invite you to put your answers in the chat box. And if the chat box isn't usable for some folks, and you would like to offer an answer, you're welcome to unmute as well. We have a lot of us in the room today, so it's also okay if we only have, 2/3 of us weighing in on this, or however it goes, but let's try it out. So I want you to put your mind's eye on the bottom of the coin. Here's the question. What are the common terms that we have for groups of people whose outcomes are worse because they find themselves structured in history to be on the bottom of the coin? And I'm thinking here about general terms. What are some of the, and Sean's off to the races, marginalized. Yes, what are some of the general terms that we have for groups of people whose outcomes are worse because they find themselves on the bottom of the coin? We're seeing marginalized, vulnerable, disadvantaged, minoritized, at risk, equity seeking, racialized, oppressed, silenced. Thank you, Elise. Nice to see you. And I see Ore out there as well. Oppressed. Yes, thank you. Someone's noting that this is linked very directly to Kimberly Crenshaw's foundational work on intersectionality. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Equity deserving, poverty, underserviced. Yes. At risk, losers, right? Yeah. Yep. Targeted, high risk, at risk, priority populations, key neighborhoods, key communities. Whew. Thank you. Yeah, great work. Great work. I want you to put your mind's eye on the top of the coin for a minute. And I want you to think about what the top of the coin represents. Unearned advantage, because of how folks are structured in history. What are the parallel terms that we have for groups of people whose outcomes are better because of the unearned advantage they receive because of how they're structured in history? What are the general successful, high income, normal, lucky, blind luck, authoritative, fortunate, trustworthy, privileged, superior, majority, healthy, wealthy, and white? Thank you, Megan. High society, 1%. Yeah, so let's take a minute with this. Here's where I want us to do the really nuanced and analytic work. What does the top of the coin represent? It represents unearned advantage. What language do we have to appropriately reflect groups of people whose outcomes are better because of the unearned advantage they receive? In the parallel way that we have this vast array of language for the bottom of the coin, I'd like to propose that we mostly don't have a language for the top of the coin. And even trying to imagine it is clunky, unfairly advantaged populations, disproportionately healthy groups for unfair reasons. Because remember, the top of the coin is about unearned advantage. Both the top and the bottom of the coin are unfair positions. So I feel like the closest we can get is lucky, right? Lucky on the lucky communities. But even that loses the thread of unearned advantage. And instead, what happens is there's a slippage. And the top of the coin, instead of being framed or in our mind map as unearned advantage, gets framed, as some of you noted in the chat box, as normal. The default norm against which there is only difference. And that default, the normness, the default just norm, beyond naming, not even needing a language for it, the norm of the top gets taken so much as just the right way of being that along come some of the other ideas that showed up in the chat box, like superior, better, authoritative, the ones that are and should be in charge. Are you with me? So we've got this fairly straightforward metaphor, and yet we're seeing that we have a huge amount of language for the bottom, and yet we do not have a nomenclature for the top, for our public health policy, for our health professions education, for our research. And I'll take it a step further and say that when we're doing this equity work, right, trying to compare outcomes from the top and the bottom of the coin because of how we're structured in history, we don't just disappear the top of the coin, we frequently disappear the coin itself. We frequently disappear the coin itself. And what ends up happening is that the starting mind map that we have for our justice work is exclusively the terrain of the bottom of the coin. It's only the bottom of the coin. And we pour our energy and care and resources into trying to address equity with this diagnosis, that the problem, that this is the totality of the problem. Why is that so dangerous? Why is it sending us backwards? Why is it harmful and indeed in many cases violent to frame the problem as the bottom of the coin and to disappear the coin and the top of the coin? Why is this an example of how we, and everybody here wants to make things better, right? We're in these fields to try and advance justice. And yet we're being co-opted into re-entrenching the problems we've got, into ensuring changelessness, as long as we are only framing the problem as the bottom of the coin. Why is that? Take your time here. If we can get this, it changes everything, right? Take your time, do it in your own mind. How does this make sense for you? If you can get to the chat box, you're welcome there. I'm going to read some from the chat box in a minute, but first see if you can connect these dots. How is it that disappearing the coin and the top of the coin sends us backwards in our efforts toward justice? So again, first out of the gate with Sean again, beautiful. Having a language for the top allows us to challenge hegemony, right? Hegemony, hegemonic processes that are put in place to ensure things that stay the same, that the power structures are preserved. And Carol notes, then the focus is that the problem is the oppressed. And there's a very, again, the slippage, because remember, what's the bottom of the coin? It's unfair advantage because of how you're structured in history, but it's a very quick slip to those people are the problem. Folks on the bottom of the coin aren't the problem. Let me say it again. Folks on the bottom of the coin are not a problem in need of fixing. It perpetuates the same colonialist mentality of us, them, me, you, not we. Yes. Because like let's just jump to the end of this story here. The problem is not the bottom of the coin. The problem is the coin. The problem is all of these coins that intersect and produce inequity that are particularly harmful and violent for folks on the bottom, but they are also bad for folks on the top. We need to be working in solidarity across the coin on the real problem, which is the systems of inequality. How we can come to see how they are baked right in to our education, to our healthcare, to our society, and how we can interrupt and resist. Right? That's the problem we want to head towards. Yeah. Whew. Yes. So one way of understanding the limits of this frame is that what we frame as the problem in the first place instantly sets the universe of possible solutions that will follow. If we only frame the problem as the bottom of the coin, we will never come up with solutions to address the coin or the complicity of folks on the top of the coin. All right. And there's one more. There's one more. How does disappearing the top of the coin allow someone like me, who finds herself on the top of most coins, how does it allow me to understand myself in my social justice work? How does it allow me to understand my motivation? How does it allow me to be seen in this work? All right, head to the chat box. How does disappearing the top of the coin allow someone like me, who finds herself on the top of most coins, to understand myself in this work? How do I get to see myself if there's no top of coin? Yeah, keep it coming. You got it. It doesn't. I'm not even in this slide deck. This has nothing to do with me. It allows me to show up because of my urge to help and fix and save. And am I saying there's something wrong with helping and fixing and saving? And yeah, I am. I'm saying there's something really wrong with it when we're trying to do justice work and we are sitting in a position that is on the top of a coin, when we are structured in history to be in the position of domination. Our role, we've been taught over and over again that the way to do justice work when you're on the top of a coin is to never know there's a coin and rather show up and fix those poor people on the bottom, right? Do you see how that re-entrenches the problem? Folks on the bottom don't need our help. We need, when we're on the top of a coin, we need their help to understand how this coin works and our complicity in it. Because here's the thing. There's no such thing as neutral, right? As long as the coin has disappeared and there's no top of the coin, it allows me to see myself as neutral, disconnected, unconnected. My motivation is altruistic. I think I got tenure for doing this. I've certainly gotten awards for doing this, right? There are all these, it is so set up to incentivize us to understand that this is the right way to approach equity. And I'm proposing today it's exactly backwards, right? Because I'm not neutral. There's no neutral. When you're on the top of a coin, you are reproducing that coin until you are not. One more time. When you're on the top of a coin, we have been socialized to uphold and reproduce that coin until we are not, in all kinds of ways that we have no idea. And that's why anti-oppression is forever work, because we will always be needing to tune into our unwitting complicity. Because once we can see it, we can interrupt it. Yeah? I'm not neutral. I am complicit in the system of inequality. Did I ask for it? Nope. But that's where I find myself structured in history. And so it's not altruism, courage, generosity that's my orientation to this work. It's accountability. It's responsibility. I didn't invent these coins, but I uphold them every day in ways that I can see and can't see. And so what does accountable action look like for the coins where we find ourselves on top? I want to take a breath here and invite you to tune into your body, tune into the thoughts. Which question are you drawn to right now? Write yourself a bullet. It's a gift to you for later. Some quiet moments just to let this settle. When you're ready, I invite you to bring your attention back to our arc. We've got one more leg in this journey. So the nature of this work that we're doing together, this is some heavy lifting. And it's our work to do. Because just look at the folks who are in the room right now. We hold an extraordinary amount of power in healthcare. How do we deploy the unearned advantage that we hold responsibly? It's not that we have no work to do. We have profound work to do. It's just that what we've been taught is our change-making work is exactly backwards. We need to be facing this way. So what is the facing this way? And what is the world of possibility that comes to light once we realize, wait a second, yes, this is about accountable action given how I'm structured in history. So in the span of time that we have, 50 minutes is long. In some cases, it's very short in others. So what we can do in our time together today is make some new thinking possible, is open up some questioning. And at the same time, I want us to land in a place in the next 10 or so minutes where we feel like we're coming back down. Because right now, the arc, at least what's happening in my body, is we have opened things up. We have been unsettling some things. And we want you, all of us, to be unsettled in the good way, right? Like that's where the beautiful learning happens. But we also want to be landing with a little bit of, okay, I have a sense of some of my next steps here. So what I'd like to do in the remainder of our time together is attend to this fundamental question of, okay, then, so what do I do then? Yeah. Again, we're all at different places. Your job today, your meta work, that first question is what are my new insights today? What are the lessons I'm here to take? So we're going to do a few more scaffolded teachings about how to think about what is this reorientation. And I invite each of you to pick up the pearls that are yours to take today. And it starts with returning to the coin and saying, well, if we can understand how the coins operate to dehumanize, subordinate, exclude, then we can see those as sites for resistance. Those are all our openings for making change. So that's where I want to start, is by the invitation to think about these systems of inequality, these big isms, operating at 3 interrelated levels. And that when we are doing anti-oppressive work, it means operating at all 3 of these levels. The first being institutional, the culture, policies, laws, what is taken as normal about the way that our spaces operate. And the second is interpersonal, the way that we think about and talk to each other. Often in EDI work, we'll hear about microaggressions, macroaggressions, and that tends to fall in this space. It's a problem when microaggressions are addressed without a power analysis that links them to these historic systems of inequality, right? And it's particularly a problem when it's framed as the things that other people do. This is the invitation in this time we have today to say, this is actually about each of us. It's not how do I stop other people from doing that? It's what's my work to do. So interpersonally is one of the other ways it shows up. And then internally, because here's the link back to humanity again. For the coins where we find ourselves on top, we have been socialized our whole lives to have an internalized sense of superiority. And it has to be unlearned. We've been socialized to have an internalized superiority. And you may be having the feeling like, that sounds terrible, I don't want to do that. And I don't think that, worse of people on the other side of that, whatever coin I'm thinking about, on top. But here's how we do have the internalized sense of superiority. And it's because our whole lives, we've been taught that social location is not just one way of being. We've been taught that it's the right way, that it's just the norm, often without even naming. This is why, showing up in a white body, even naming whiteness, it's just one way of being. And yet it's been framed so much as just the right way. And think of all the outcome measures we use clinically. Think of all the epi curves. Think of how much is just taken as the normal right way of being, that it's beyond naming. That is a profound position of superiority, to view one's way of being in the world as the right one. So that needs to be unlearned. And the internal work for the coins where we're on the bottom is we've been taught forever to have internalized inferiority, and that needs to be unlearned too. So I'm going to remind you that third question was, what are my next steps for learning and action? And maybe there was something here about one of those levels that's firing up for you. And this is the reminder, can folks be on the privileged side of some coins and the oppression of others at the same time? Yes, that's all of us. And beautifully cued earlier was honoring that this is intersectionality. This is one way of translating a beautiful, complex concept of intersectionality advanced by Black feminist scholars, Kimberly Crenshaw, Patricia Hill Collins, and others, which is inviting us to consider that it's not just one coin. We need to be considering the multiple locations on the tops and bottoms of various coins at the same time, of ourselves, of our colleagues, of our patients, of our learners. And that it's not math. It's not, oh, I'm on top of 3, bottom of 3, therefore it cancels out, no oppression. It's not that at all. It's that our multiple locations create complex arrangements of advantage and disadvantage that requires a nuanced analysis and will matter differently in different spaces, depending on time and place and context. So, the invitation here is not to understand all of this. And let's just honor, not all the coins are represented here, right? It's just a few exemplars. It's to honor the complexity here, the nature of the learning and unlearning work that is ours to do when we're facing this way in anti-oppressive practice. Because that's what's at the heart of this. What is my work to do? The answer is, it depends. Our work is to dismantle these coins, but the nature of our work to do is going to be different depending on which side of that coin, that particular coin, we find ourselves. So let's, all the coins where you find yourself on the bottom, you don't need a workshop from me. This is where the struggle leaders, the movements have been for all time and still are. Movements are happening all around us. I think many of us are involved in these social struggles. They are led by, and we need to be accountable to, struggle leaders on the bottom of the coin. That's straightforward. What is very hidden from view is the orientation for the coins where we're on top. This is the one where I'm proposing we've been taught to do change making facing this way. We need a complete reorientation. So pick any coin where you find yourself on top. It could be your white, and so it's a coin of racism. It could be your able-bodied, it's the coin of ableism. It could be you're a settler, and it's settler colonialism. It could be you're straight, and it's the coin of heteronormativity or heterosexism. It could be that you're cisgender, CIS, and it's about cisgenderism in contrast to being trans, and on the list goes. What is this reorientation? The language that I've given it in that 2019 paper is again, the practice, right? Practicing critical allyship. It's clunky language. I'm not fond of it anymore. There's lots of better terms that are out there. My favorite right now comes from African-American physician Ijeoma Ndodina-Para, co-liberator. Co-liberator. This is about liberating all of us. This is about collective liberation. So let's drill down a little bit more. This is how the Anti-Oppression Network describes this reorientation. It's as an active, consistent, and arduous practice of unlearning and reevaluating, in which folks on the top operate in solidarity with folks on the bottom, not how we've been taught, which is to save, fix, or help. We need alarm bells to be going off when we're trying to do equity work and we know we're in the dominant position and we are feeling a helping urge. Whew, that is to be unlearned. So how do we make this transition? Well, understanding our position on the top of coins is what makes it possible. Because when we don't, it leads to an irrational sense that we're neutral, that we are the experts, and that we are the right ones to be writing that policy, allocating that budget. And we don't see how these coins operate to sever, to segregate, and distance us from the humanity of each other. So what is the role then? For folks on the top of the coin, it's to leverage and mobilize the power and safety with which we walk. That's why I'm in this work. There's a broad constellation of struggle work I'm involved in with Black and Indigenous struggle partners, and I'm deployed to do this introductory work because these are ideas that can come from my body differently. I can walk with a safety. And for those coins where we're on the bottom, to honor that that's where there's the embodied expertise, but also so many challenges, that this has been more challenging in the last few years. And what we need is solidarity across the coin, each of us in our lanes. And so the final slide, if I were to put it into a few lines here, before, and facing this direction, and before I mean like the first 20 years of my career. My history is mostly in global health, HIV research and global health research. This is how I've been taught to think, is to face this direction where I use my expertise to help marginalized populations. And here's the invitation to a reframe. What if we rejected that norm of that before statement and instead started with this one? I see and understand my own role in upholding systems of oppression that create inequities, including within my role right here in healthcare. That I learn from folks on the bottom. I give credit to them, and I work in solidarity with to help me. I'm the one in need of help. And that a big part of my role for those coins where I'm on top is to speak to others also on the top of the coin, because they will hear the exact same messages from my body than they will from someone on the bottom of the coin. And that all of this is toward the end of mobilizing in collective action under the leadership of folks on the bottom of the coin with specific critical expertise, right? Not just anybody, the struggle leaders on the bottom of the coin, with accountability to, in solidarity with, to flex and leverage the safety and power that we have on the top of those coins. Whew. So a deep breath. In a moment, I'm going to turn it back over to the Damon, Catherine, Hugh, Jennifer team. After that, we'll have, I think, what we've talked about as a slow exit. Some folks, the next thing you need is going to be to go on to the next part of your day. Others may want to hang around and make some sense of this. Just before I hand it over, I want to share my profound gratitude for the chance to play with some of these ideas today. And share that if there was anything that didn't sit well, the only thing I'm sure of is I didn't get it all right today. This is flawed, fraught work. If there's anything I didn't get quite right and you want to let me know about that, that's feedback I would really value. It's welcome anytime. Yeah, thank you so much. It's good to be in this work with you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I just feel so grateful that you've had these conversations with us today. And like yourself, I'm on the top of many of those coins that you spoke of today. And I just feel so privileged to hear you talk through the coin model. And I've heard you speak before, and each time it makes me think. And I like the phrasing when you talk about the invitation to understand my role. And I really appreciate that. And the words that I really took away today were co-liberation and baked in. I feel like those are powerful words to make me reflect and as I move forward. So I just want to say thank you today.
And I'm going to pipe in. Thank you, Stephanie. The first word I wrote was wow. I really liked your pause slides there to kind of take it all in, because for me, I really appreciated that. And I was taking a bunch of notes as we went there. You know, for me at the start, just really thinking about, I've been privileged to be granted a new leadership position with a high profile, and I've been thinking about this topic for the last couple of weeks. And you've definitely given me opportunity, along with the comments in the chat. There's a lot in there to really, as you say, sort of change the frame of thought. And you know, I think all of us here trying, and it you know, the learning and unlearning, reframing, and thinking. I think what's reinforced is thinking about my work to do with others. It just that leveraging and mobilizing and the community work together is what really comes home for me. And you know, if you gave me a few more minutes, I could probably reflect a little more articulately. But you know, I'm just very grateful to have you here, and for us to come together and to have a discussion, a workshop, as you say. Feel quite humbled to be on the top of many coins, and it's not lost on me the you know, what you say is my work ahead. I very much look forward to it, along with all the other people here and the people that I work with. So that was a long thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I'm just sorry, as I was navigating my share screen here. Just wanted to, again, thank Stephanie. And for those of you who are thinking of the December Health and Humanity, it will be Shalisa Barton will be speaking to us. She's be sharing her experiences about as a nurse during COVID, her experiences specifically in the rural and remote nursing. And I know you'll be hearing from Jennifer, so I just wanted to end on this as well. Thank you, Jennifer, keeping us on track. So just wanted to say thank you, everybody, again.
Would it be okay if I offer one idea to send us off with?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to share that the ideas that we're talking about here, this idea of a reframe to anti-oppressive practice within the academy, it's something I've almost never seen role modeled. It's not that a whole bunch of people, especially white leaders, have this figured out and we're just catching up. It's that there's loads of excellent racialized leaders in the academy who I see trying to advance this, but I'm speaking out to my white colleagues especially. If it feels difficult to imagine, well, what would this even look like if we were operating in a way that was accountable for how we're located in history around whiteness? I wanted to share that, you know, this is the explicit mandate that I've come into my work here at Queen's with. And for me, I don't really have any role models out there to understand what this looks like. And so it's dream work. It is imagination work. And that's what anti-oppression and abolition work is that it's creative, imaginative dream work. It's imagining a better future. And so for anyone who might be sitting with those feelings of like, but how would I actually do this? It's like, yeah, how would we actually do this? And let's try it out. Let's be creative and imaginative and not feel like this is something that's going to be easy to step into, but rather is going to be this beautiful experiment that we all engage in as we try to see and interrupt our complicity in these systems within the spaces in which we work.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I think we're going to say goodnight to everybody. Great to have everybody come and join us tonight. And as always, it's just great to spend this 1 hour together every once in a while. Good night, everyone.